Hi, Craig, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this project. I think it's a great project, but I will say that it was difficult to dredge up some of these memories. So,
Right. And I want to thank you for participating because I also know that it's difficult for people to sometimes relive these things because many of them we bury. I know I had until I started recounting my own. So I do appreciate it because I also think it's important for other people to hear these experiences.
it is important.
Right. S-
My name is Jeanne Devine. I live in Manhattan in New York City. I grew up in Michigan, it's my childhood, and then I've lived a number of places, Washington, D.C., different areas in Texas, and I've been in New York since 2005. I was an attorney. I guess I still am an attorney right now, not practicing. I've retired from 30 years with the Department of Treasury.
Excellent. So why don't you just start recounting your incidents for us?
Number one, the first time I understood that people were a different race than me was in fourth grade. I liked this boy named Danny. He was white. I didn't realize that was a problem until I go home and tell my parents, and he tells his parents. And all of a sudden, it's like, no, you can't like him. Why not? Because he's white. And that's about the only explanation I got. They kept us apart. It was pretty traumatic, but that was when I first understood the differences. Number two, I was in my early teens in Michigan going to vacation Bible school at a Church of Christ. And I was into boys then, I was flirting. And after the class one evening, a couple of the church elders took me aside and said, basically, stop flirting with the white boy. You should like the black boy because he's more like you. And I didn't say anything. Obviously, I asked my parents if I could never go back to that church again. And I didn't. I'm skipping now to the University of Michigan, where I went for my undergraduate degree. It was my freshman year, and I had dreams of becoming a journalist. The best thing to do then was go and volunteer on the campus newspaper. I go to the volunteer orientation. I'm all excited. I go to get my assignment, and I realize there's nobody there but white men. And I think I left the room just for a minute to go to the bathroom. I'm coming back, get my assignment, and I hear them saying, let's give her the worst assignment. Let's put her on the midnight shift writing headlines. And I kind of had a feeling it wasn't going to go well after that. But for about 2 weeks, I went and I did the role that they asked me to do. But the atmosphere was just so unoppressive and welcoming that they got their results and I quit. Number four, this was in 1985. Before I went to law school, I was living in a small town just outside of Memphis called Marianna, Arkansas. And I was married at the time, following my husband there from Michigan for a job. I'm all excited. I'm in my new town and my nice home. And I think, well, let me go to the nearby grocery store and just pick up a few things. I was still exploring. I go to the local grocery store, I get my groceries, take them to the cashier, put them on the counter. She's ringing them up. And she says, there's a Kroger grocery store in the next town over called Forest City. You might like going there better because we don't really like your kind here in this store. And oh, and when you're about to pay me, don't put the money in my hand. Put it on the counter. I was just so shocked. I just walked out without the groceries. Never went back to that store. The Kroger actually was better. Number five, in law school, it was my first semester. I was carrying this huge load of books. I mean, it must have been about that high, stacked, trying to get to my locker or class, going through a hallway door. And as I'm trying to get through the door, this white guy he's gone through the door, he turns around and looks at me, sees me carrying all the books, and he deliberately slams the door in my face. Just slams the door.
And where, for the listeners, where was law school?
This was at the University of Texas in Austin, Texas. And I remember I was so shocked. I just kind of, trying to get through the door, but luckily someone else came up and opened the door for me. Number 6. This was also in law school. I entered a writing competition to get on the law journal. That was how they decided who would get a place on the law journal. I win a spot on the law journal. They list all the names of the people who had succeeded. And when the list comes out, and it's posted around the school, and I see that somebody has written next to my name and circled it and saying, "This must be a mistake." Because I was the only person of color on the list. And I just went around and ripped off all the sheets that had the results on them. People even asked me, oh, is that true? Why are people saying that? Yeah, I was like, how do you explain that? I won the spot. Somebody obviously didn't like it that I got their spot. Too bad. Also, number 7, as a member of the Law Journal, we had access to a private library. You could go up there and study. It was quiet. But you had to have a code. You had to punch the code in to get in. For several weeks after I got the spot on the Law Journal and I'm going up to the private library, people kept asking me, how did I get the code to the private library? Then number 8, when the next year I became an editor on the Law Journal, and I was preparing a professor's note for publication, coming up to the deadline, and I noticed that my source material is missing from my desk, a big file. So I'm asking around, maybe the cleaning lady moved it when she cleaned off the counters, and nobody knows anything about it. So I'm getting off running. One day I just decide I'm gonna come and look for it myself, late one night when nobody's there. So I'm looking around and I find my file in the desk of this white woman that I was working with. And when I found it, and then when I confronted her the next day, she just kind of shrugged and was like, whatever, I don't know how it got in there. It was just ridiculous. I figured out that she was worried because the deadline was coming up and she hadn't prepared her notes, so she didn't want to look bad. She was trying to make me look bad that I couldn't finish my note on time. That's crazy. Number 9, this is after law school, maybe about, I'm gonna say in the late 90s, I had transferred from Washington, D.C. office to the Dallas, Texas office by choice. I wanted to be there. There was an issue with work. I would have to go to the banks. I did banking law, and I would either have to go to meetings with the banks or with the examiners. But some of these cases were in small towns in Texas. And I'm trying to explain to my white male boss that I cannot travel to small towns in Texas by myself. And he just wasn't getting it. And at the time, I was like, well, I don't care if you get it or not. I'm not going by myself. But he didn't understand why. He was trying to be reasonable, but he didn't understand why. What happened next? This was in 1998 in a small town called Jasper, Texas. Some white supremacists took a black man named James Burr Jr. and they tied him by chains to the back of a truck and drug him through the streets until he died. When that happened, and I go talk to my boss again, and his comment, oh, I can't believe this is still happening in this day and age. And I just said to him, well, I was trying to tell you that it's still happening. Now you understand why I'm not going to go to any small towns in Texas by myself. Number 10, this was in the same legal office in Dallas. I worked with a white secretary who clearly did not like me and was very envious of my position as a lawyer. Well, she said to me, she said, you must come from a rich family. That's how you were able to have all these opportunities to go to law school and become a lawyer. If I had the same opportunities you had, I would be more than just a secretary. I kind of laughed to myself. I said, well, let me think about that. My dad worked 3 jobs to put food on the table. And before that, my mom told me we were on food stamps. I got scholarships all the way through college and law school, academic scholarships. So I just said to her, if you had really wanted to be more than a secretary, you would have found a way. Don't think that I had some special privilege, because I didn't. Number 11, Lauren, still in Dallas. I actually lived in Dallas from 1991 to 2005. During that time at the office, I had the audacity to date a white guy. This was after my husband had been African American. Another guy I had dated there was also Black. So when I started dating a white guy, this was big news, I guess, gossip-wise in the office. And I come in, or I'm there late one day, I had gone to the restroom or something, and I come back, and there are people sneaking in my office looking around. So I catch them, and I was like, what are you doing in my office? What are you looking for? Well, one of them that's actually finally admitted that they were looking for a picture of the white guy that I was dating. And they just wanted to see what he looked like. I just laughed at that. Number 12, this is following in the same story of me dating a white guy. There was a Hispanic receptionist at the office. When she found out, she just approached me and said, I don't think the races should mix. And I was kind of like, okay, I didn't ask your opinion. Thank you for that. And then I threw it back on her. I said, well, what should I do about my nephew? My sister is married to a white man. What, should I not acknowledge my nephew? And she didn't really know what to say to that. So she said, oh, well, you must be used to being around white people, so that's why you date them. Wow. I got a laugh out of that one too. And then another Hispanic woman at the office, who I actually thought was my friend, basically asked the same question in a different way. She said, why would you date a white guy? And I just said back to her, why wouldn't I date a white guy? What's the problem? And this was even more ironic because she is married to a white man. But I'm not supposed to date one. Why? I said, because my skin is darker color than hers. I guess that was the only reason. I don't know. Number 14, continuing on, every time in Dallas that I went out with this particular white guy, we got stared at. A couple times he got called names. It was not fun. There is an instance here in New York of that same occurrence, though, that stands out. And I was with my date, who was a white man, and we were standing in line at Sony Hall to go in to see a show. And it was January, freezing cold. So we were kind of hugged up. And this older white man in line just stared at us. And I thought, if you've ever heard that terminology of looks could kill, this was the textbook definition, that he was just disgusted by what he saw. And it was so blatant. I noticed that when I'm dating white guys, they don't always notice those mean looks, But this was so bad that this guy I was with, he even noticed it too. He was like, why is that guy staring at us? I said, well, I'll let you take one guess. Number 15, I just had down all the white and Asian shopkeepers that have followed me around their store. Number 16, the white TSA agents. I used to wear my hair, or at times I wear it curly, and it's kind of full. The TSA agents asked if they could pat down my head. Pat down my hair. Yes. During my trip to China in 2014, my group had about, it was maybe 30 of us, and it was actually about half African American. The Chinese tour guide warned us that going into some of the small towns in China, they've never seen Black people, so he couldn't guarantee what they were going to do or how they were going to act. And I did have several of them come up to me and ask to take a picture with me. And I said, fine, as long as I got a copy of the picture. But it was interesting that the woman I was traveling with, who was also African American, she said that their stares and the attention made her feel like she was in the zoo. I thought that was a good comment. Also in China, I had a lot of people approach me about my hair. I was wearing it in twist, and they just seemed to be fascinated by it. They would come up to me, they would want me to twist it, untwist it, they would want to touch it. And that happened a lot in China. Also in St. Petersburg, Russia, I was at the gift shop for Catherine's Palace buying a souvenir. I'm standing in line, and there are people in line. And this blonde woman, tall blonde woman behind the counter, when I get up to the counter, and there are people in line behind me, so I'm very embarrassed. She says, can I come out behind the counter and touch your hair? And I want to know how you do it. What do you do? And all these people are standing there, but they seem just as curious about my hair as this woman was. It was just a very strange moment to be in the middle of Russia and the only Black person, and this woman wanting to touch my hair. Number 20. This goes back to University of Texas. I've been a good alumni. I've given donations. When they come to New York, about once a year, and they give a really nice party, I always go. I signed up, I registered. This most recent party was actually at the New York Public Library, and they were having it in one of their private meeting rooms. Oh, I'm going in, and mind you, I'm appropriately dressed, I'm registered, but I get to the door of the event, and before the woman even bothers, the white woman even bothers to check me in, she's like, are you sure you're in the right place? And that has happened to me anytime the law school has any prestigious location, law firm. It's happened several times with that. Are you sure you're in the right place? Like, yes, people, I graduated from the University of Texas Law School, so that's my 20.
You're 20. Jeanne, I want to thank you for telling these stories. They, as I said earlier, they are important. Before we wrap up on this portion, is there something that you would like to leave with the audience to think about or reflect on after they've listened to your experiences?
I noticed when I've listened to some of the other ones, and even observing you while you're recording me, the shock factor. I want to just warn people to be ready for the shock factor in some of these stories that we're telling, because people truly don't believe that it happens to you, but it really does happen.
Yes.
And nothing, and there's not a lot you can do except bring attention to it like you're doing now.
Again, Jeanne, thank you so much. I am looking forward to sharing your story with others, and I hope that we get some good dialogue as a result of it.
Me too.